Mr. President, thank you for doing this. There's been a lot of energy as you've been traveling the last few days.
Right.
You just finished a rally here in Fayetteville, and you've said your legacy is on the ballot. Yet there are reports that the African-American vote is not exactly where they would want it. How do we translate the energy that you clearly inspire and the message that you've inspired about your legacy into actual votes?
Well, look, the good news is that what we've seen over the last several days is in Florida, in North Carolina, in places all across the country, votes generally have been up. You've seen in the African-American community big surges in early vote, big surges in Latino vote, big surges in youth vote. And so if we can just sustain what we've done over the last several days, then I will feel good about the ultimate turnout results. But what is true is that in part because I think a lot of people still can't believe that Donald Trump would be elected president, there may be a complacency setting in. And you know, the main thing that I've been trying to explain to people is that if you supported me in 08, if you supported me in 12, if you think that I've done a good job, if you believe that Michelle's done a good job, everything that we've done over the last 8 years will be reversed with a Trump presidency. And everything will be sustained and built on with a Hillary Clinton presidency. So this vote is as important as any of those other two votes in being able to maintain a progressive agenda that keeps 20 million people with health insurance and hopefully gets the next 20 million, that makes sure that we're working on issues like criminal justice reform, and somebody who actually wants to see a reinvigorated civil rights office in the Justice Department, that wants to make sure that things like early childhood education get put in place so that our young people can all get the benefits of a great education at the earliest stages all the way through college. You can't say you care about those things and then suggest somehow that you're feeling cynical or you're not sufficiently inspired. Michelle and I, we talk over the dinner table. We explain to our daughters, not everything's supposed to be inspiring. Sometimes you just do what you have to do, and one of the things you got to do right now is to make sure to vote for Hillary Clinton.
You've actually criticized Trump for having the support of KKK sympathizers. I mean, this is frightening for many people in this country, but I don't know if it has come home to them.
Well, look, I've been critical, not that somebody decides to support him, but that the fact that he doesn't immediately disown that support and sends signals that he is okay with discrimination against minorities, that he's okay or sympathetic with respect to discrimination towards Muslims. These are things that he says on an ongoing basis. Comments that would have once been considered completely disqualifying by a Democratic or Republican candidate. Imagine if I, when I had been running, had said 1/10 of the things that Donald Trump has said. People would have immediately said that person's not qualified to be president. If Hillary Clinton right now said just a fraction of the things that Mr. Trump said, people would be outraged, and the Republicans would say, you can't have that person serving. And it's not just with respect to his attitudes towards minorities, it's his lack of respect for the Constitution. I mean, when you stand on a presidential debate stage and you say to your political opponent, I'm going to throw you in jail, that's what happens in banana republics. That's what happens in a lot of countries around the world that are run by authoritarians. And so I take him at his word when he says that he admires somebody like a Vladimir Putin. And the fact that you've got Republicans who in the past have criticized me for even talking to Russians and now feel comfortable with supporting somebody who considers the former head of the KGB as a role model indicates that either they know better and they don't care, or they don't know better.
You look at this personally for a minute, because one of the things he said, he rose to political prominence outside of his business and entertainment with the birther issue. Right. I mean, can you imagine how you would feel standing on the steps of the Capitol, having to hand over the power and watch him put his hand on that Bible and become your successor after saying you weren't even a U.S. citizen?
You know, the thing is, I don't take any of this personally, because he is not somebody who's fit to be president in any circumstances. I would feel deeply frustrated, not because of anything he said about me, but because I would fear for the future of our country. And I say that mindful of the fact that there are disagreements between Republicans and Democrats, but I've said this in speeches before. When I ran against John McCain, I thought he had wrong ideas, and I believed I would be a better president. But I didn't think that if John McCain was president, that basic standards of decency, basic constitutional norms would be out the window. When I ran against Mitt Romney, I disagreed with him on his economic policies, but he released his tax returns. I wasn't worried about what kinds of business interests that he might have. When Donald Trump says that he is prepared to be president and he will have his family run his businesses, not in a blind trust, when he's got all kinds of business interests that nobody knows what's what and where money's coming from and where it might be going, that is the kind of unprecedented attitude with respect to the highest office in the land that would make me concerned about the country as a whole. And so the good news is that the majority of the American people recognize that he's not fit to be president. The challenge that we always have, and you're very familiar with this, Reverend, is that who votes doesn't always match up with the attitudes of the majority.
Yeah.
And if we had a system in which consistently the majority of the American people voted, not just during presidential years but midterms, Congress would look very different and we'd have very different policies.
You mentioned civil rights, and I've been part of the leadership that has met with you on all of the civil rights issues since you've been in. So I know of your sensitivity there, from commuting sentences to when you had Newt Gingrich and I even tour on education. What do you hope continues from your civil rights legacy into the new administration, and how would you tell them to relate to those issues and to the broad section of people to work with? Because you've set a real bar there.
I think there are two ways to think about it. I think that there is work that has to be sustained to defend civil rights and prevent bad things from happening. And then there is the body of work we've been doing to make things actually better. On the defense side, we've reinvigorated a civil rights division of the voting rights, or a voting rights division of the Justice Department that is serious about prosecuting discriminatory actions. And that makes a big difference. That is serious about protecting voting rights. That makes a big difference. So those kinds of institutional structures that we've set up, we have to sustain. But as you know, we also have to make sure that all the work we've been doing around criminal justice reform moves forward. Some of that I've been able to do on my own. You know, the commutations of close to 1,000 individuals.
More than the last 10 presidents.
More, last 11, I think it is.
I'm sorry.
We have reinvigorated the Office of the Pardon Attorney in the Justice Department so that continuously we can review people who've gotten overly harsh sentences for nonviolent drug offenses. That I think we can sustain. I think the work we've done with the Task Force for 21st Century Policing, that at times you've participated in, terrific recommendations coming from Ferguson activists, police chiefs, prosecutors, talking about things like instituting body cameras and making sure that they're used properly, to having independent inquiries when there's a shooting, things that we should be able to agree on because it'll be better for the police and make their lives better and safer, but will also ensure communities feel that they're being treated fairly. a lot of that work requires us to continue to partner with state and local officials. And so we need a president in there who keeps that momentum going, because it's not as if that problem's going to go away anytime soon. Ultimately, what I'd like to see is Congress pass criminal justice reform legislation that would systematically lower the prison time for nonviolent drug offenses, emphasize diversion programs, think about how we can rehabilitate those who have actually gone through the penal system so that they're getting the education they need and can stay out of trouble, but rather can be productive tax-paying citizens. So the good news is Hillary Clinton has signed up for all these issues. She is prepared to do it. She has the background to do it. Mr. Trump has an entirely different approach. His attitude is to drum up fear and suggest somehow that we're in the midst of this crime wave, when in fact crime today is as low as it has been since the 1960s. There are particular cities like Chicago where we are seeing a significant spike in homicides that we've got to pay attention to. But what we don't need is a president who is using the issue of crime as a lever, as a signifier, in order to get votes and foster fear in the population.
There are reports, and we're winding down, there are reports of leaks from the FBI about Mrs. Clinton that seems to be geared toward harming her candidacy. Does it disturb you or even raise an eyebrow at you that there may be some elements in law enforcement or even the FBI that are purposely trying to affect this campaign or this election?
Well, I'll say what I've said before. I'm always very careful about speaking about active cases being handled by the Justice Department or the FBI, because I don't want to appear as if I'm influencing them unduly. The reason for that is that historically, both under Democratic and Republican administrations, our goal has been and should be that our investigators and our prosecutors are independent of politics, that they're not politicized, that they're not used as a weapon to advantage either side in partisan arguments. And I want to make sure that we continue with that tradition and with that norm. Now, I've said before, and I'll say again, Jim Comey is a good man, and I do not believe that he is in any way trying to influence the election one way or another. I think he is a serious public servant who wants to do the right thing. And I think the overwhelming majority of FBI feel the same way. The overwhelming majority of people in the Justice Department feel the same way. What I have said is I want all of us to think about maintaining these norms. When you are investigating a case, then unless you have unearthed something, you need to just do your job. If there are things that you think are worth presenting, then you present them to a prosecutor. The prosecutor then makes a judgment. The prosecutor can make a decision either to file a charge or not to file a charge. But we give enormous power to our law enforcement officials to keep us safe, to do a great job, to protect us. But we also put these norms and rules in place, some of them written, some of them unwritten, to make sure that any of us are not suddenly affected by innuendo or rumors. And that's true for an ordinary citizen, and it's true for somebody who's running for President of the United States.
The famous photo of you with a 5-year-old African-American young boy touching your hair, is something I think many of us will never forget. What effect do you hope your presidency has on young African-Americans for years to come?
Well, you know, Michelle and I always say we can't judge what impact we'll have in history, how people will view us 10 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now. What we have tried to do is to conduct ourselves in this amazing, privileged position in a way that if children are watching us, then they are receiving the same kinds of values we've been trying to teach our kids. We've tried to make sure that people see us as honest, as working hard, as treating people with respect, as being kind to people. And, you know, I hope that children watching are going to see that and say, okay, if I want to achieve something in life, I don't need to be a bully. I don't need to put other people down. I can lift them up. I can serve. And I think I've met enough young African Americans, and I've now been in office long enough to realize that when I was elected, you know, 10-year-olds are now in college.
Yeah.
To know that I think there are young African American boys who feel like maybe there's nothing they can't achieve if they work hard, that might not have felt that way before my election. I think Michelle has inspired a whole bunch of young African American girls to know that you can be beautiful and strong and confident and be a great mom and be a great speaker and be a lawyer, and so you don't have any limits. But what I also hope, Al, is that there are a lot of white kids and Latino kids and Asian kids and gay kids who have heard us and watched us, and they too have felt like the world is big enough for them and their ideas and their vision and their creativity, and that they can achieve their dreams not based on their last name or what they look like, but based on what they do and how useful and hardworking they are, and that is in some ways just as important, because what I ultimately believe is that America's strength is that we come from everywhere, and that we have this ideal that has been breached many times in the past, but we keep on getting closer and closer to, where you're judged on the content of your character. And having a little white girl come up to Michelle and say, you know, I really admire you, means she's looking through different eyes. She doesn't think, well, I can't admire Michelle Obama because she doesn't look like me. She's seeing Michelle Obama and she's saying, I can't admire you because you were a little girl too once, and look what you were able to achieve. And that change in mindset is a powerful thing.
People are going to vote. This is Sunday morning when this will air, and it'll be all over radio. What do you want as your closing argument to be to voters that are saying they're suppressing the vote? I don't know if it matters. What should they know from President Barack Obama?
Here's what they need to know. I would not have become president unless people turned out to vote. Over these last 8 years, we have gone from coming close to a Great Depression to unemployment rate that's 4.9%, created 15 million new jobs. Last year, we saw the highest jump in incomes that we've seen in 30, 40 years, saw the biggest drop in poverty that we've seen in 30, 40 years. We just saw a jobs report this week that showed that wages are going up at the fastest pace since before we saw the Great Recession. We have made so much progress in so many areas. All that is at stake. And I won North Carolina in 2008 by 2 votes per precinct. 2 votes per precinct. And so this notion that your vote doesn't count, the fact of the matter is you might be one of those 2 votes that changes the direction of American history. And in this situation where we have such a stark choice, where we have Hillary Clinton, somebody who is an outstanding public servant, knows her stuff, is as experienced as anybody has ever been for this office, who has served in my administration. I have seen her up close, who has fought the good fight her entire life, who has put forward probably the most progressive platform in history, and is committed to making sure that she builds on the progress that we've made over these last 8 years. And you have another guy who is temperamentally unfit to be commander-in-chief, unqualified, doesn't know anything or seem to be concerned about learning basic public policy, who has shown himself to be a bully and willing to discriminate against people who are not like him or somehow oppose him. When you have a choice that stark, the idea that you would sit on the sidelines is unacceptable. So I am asking everybody who's watching this show, if you have not voted, you've got to go out there and vote. And particularly young people who may have been inspired by Bernie, but now say, well, Hillary's too establishment. Somebody who's been marching after a police shooting and says, well, all politicians are the same. That's not true. The fact of the matter is that nobody is going to be able from this office, as powerful as it is, to deliver everything to everybody right away. Progress is never made overnight. Yes, there are going to be times where compromises need to be made. Yes, there's no candidate out there who's going to be perfect on your issue the way you want it done 100% of the time. But you have to look at the choice we have right now, and it could not be starker. And if somebody is not voting right now, who is watching your program, you are voting for Donald Trump. And if that's the case, then you need to own that you think his ideas and his behavior are okay. I don't. And if you don't, then you got to get off your chair and you got to get out there and vote. And the notion that somehow voter suppression is keeping you from voting, as systematic as Republicans have tried to make voting more difficult for minorities, for Democrats, for young people, the truth of the matter is, if you actually want to vote, then you can vote. And it'll take you 15 minutes in most cases where you've got early vote. If there's no early vote, then yes, you might have to wait in line for 20 minutes or half an hour to vote. And the question would be, why would you disempower yourself? Why would you give them that victory if they're trying to keep you from voting by not voting? We disempower ourselves all the time. You can't tell me that all those folks who don't vote are doing so because somebody's turned them away or somebody's intimidated them. No, it's because they decided they had something better to do. And my suggestion would be, in this election, at this moment, there's nothing better to do than vote. And if you need to know how to vote, just go to iwillvote.com. It'll tell you exactly how to vote, where to vote. And, you know, I am so proud of the work we've done, but I've said before, it's never the work of just one person or one president or one term. The work we engage in to make this country better is an ongoing process, and it depends on active citizens getting educated about issues and going out there and participating. Now is that moment where people have to be heard.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.